Kanye Omari West. Needs no introduction, you know who he is. Welcome to Kanye West Worst to Best, and this has been done numerous times by other YouTubers and other journalists. However, I thought it'd be a good time and a fitting time to finally do my version of this video, given that Kanye has just announced his next album in a now deleted tweet. He's already deleted the tweet. Fantastic. And you know, given that he's running for president, I thought it would finally be the right time for me to get on this trend. Just let me preface this list by saying Kanye is an artist that has reinvented himself stylistically with pretty much every album that he's released, and therefore almost no one is going to have the same ranking as anyone else. So don't get too mad at me in the comments if your favourite Kanye album isn't even in the top 5. I'm also only going to be including solo studio albums, so you're not going to see Watch the Throne or Kids See Ghosts on here, as good as those may be. Also, before I get carried away, my name's Peter, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already to see more music related content such as this. Drop a like on the video if you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's begin this wonderful journey. Yes, in my opinion, Kanye's most recent release is also his weakest, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to many of you. This is Kanye's self-described gospel album. I do that because it's not really a gospel album, it's more of a hip-hop album with gospel and soul elements. Truth be told, this isn't the worst album I've ever heard. I mean, there are actually a few highlights on here, such as the upbeat and energetic Follow God, which sees Kanye return to his classic sample chopping roots. The track Salah is a very powerful and triumphant moment to begin the record with. The track Use This Gospel is also kind of cool, but it's mainly because of the Clips reunion, and everyone knows that. Despite a small number of pretty good songs, most of this album just kind of reads to me as a so-so attempt at Christian music. An artist has every right to express their religious beliefs in the art that they create, that goes without saying. However, I just think that there are more interesting and compelling ways to do it than what Kanye presented here on Jesus Is King. It's an obvious example, but look at someone like Kendrick Lamar. Look at how he weaves the themes of religion and God into his music. It's so intricate, it's so thought-provoking. Another example is from Chance the Rapper, who on a project like Colouring Book brings a lot of character and personality when discussing his religious beliefs. I don't really think that Jesus Is King is the compelling or the artistically refined statement that it could have been. The lyricism a lot of the time is so amateurish and just doesn't get to the point of anything. The Chick-fil-A line on the song Closed on Sunday comes to mind. It's very clear to me that Kanye is intent on creating more godly music, and I just hope he can do it in a more interesting way on his upcoming album. I must say, I am really liking the lead single from his next album, Wash Us in the Blood, that came out like a couple weeks ago. And that song also addresses the topic of religion, but it does it in a much more captivating way than anything on Jesus Is King. So we can only hope that it can go up from here. So Kanye's second most recent album is also his second worst. I think Kanye might be past his peak. It's very sad to think about that, but I think that just might be the truth. Ye is the result of the whole slavery as a choice, Trump endorsement, MAGA hat kind of period that Kanye went through back in 2018. Right after that TMZ interview when Kanye said the infamous slavery line, it's reported that he actually scrapped the album he'd been working on up to that point and just decided to start working on what would eventually become Ye. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not surprised to hear that, because this album sounds rushed and unfinished. Once again though, it's a Kanye album, so it's not a completely lost cause. There are some great moments on this album, such as the first half of the opener, I Thought About Killing You, which sees Kanye deliver this really eerie and unsettling monologue. The following track, Yikes, sounds like a bit of an update on the vintage Kanye formula, and it kind of sees him take a twisted look at his mental state at the time. The track Violent Crimes is a very personal and heartfelt way to end this album. It kind of sees Kanye reflecting on how his perception of women overall has changed since having daughters of his own. Need I remind you though, that this album contains the song All Mine, which is easily one of Kanye's weakest songs ever. The song contains two of the most hilariously bad lyrics the man has ever spoken out loud. And I'll let you guess which ones those are. I think it's pretty obvious. A lot of the lyricism across this album is just generally kind of weak. And I know Kanye's never been the most technically or lyrically gifted rapper. He's not like Aesop Rock or MF Doom or anything. But the pen game just is not there on Ye. The song Ghost Town is pretty okay. I mean, Kanye's singing is very good. Better than most of the singing I heard up to that point from him on any other album. But I don't understand the cult of Kanye fans that think Ghost Town is like one of his top 10 songs. It's a decent song. It's a good song. It's not that good though. Ultimately, I think this album places so low for me because it just doesn't feel essential to Kanye's discography. It just kind of feels like a weird dead end in his career. It's not super innovative. It's not cutting edge like Kanye usually is. It's just a dead end in one of the most tumultuous and strange periods in Kanye's whole career. This is Kanye's third most recent album. This is also Kanye's third weakest, in my opinion. Are you sensing a pattern yet? Now, this is a weird one, because I like this album way more than I did when I first heard it like 2 or 3 years ago. I used to think The Life of Pablo was a complete mess, with very few highlights on it. Nowadays, I still think it's very much a mess, but I think there's a lot more highlights on it than I was giving it credit for. Ultralight Beam is still a brilliant gospel-inspired opener, which of course is seen as Chance the Rapper's shining moment, and he does have a great verse on here. Famous is one of Kanye's better songs from the 2010s, features that infamous Taylor Swift line in the hook, as well as amazing production on both ends of the song. The track Freestyle 4 is such a freakish and a sinister moment on the album. Kanye's just overcome with sexual desires, and he's just asking this person, what if we just f***ed right now? It's just such a strange and a surreal moment. I used to hate this song. Honestly, I love this song nowadays. Real Friends is another highlight, a very personal and thoughtful track with a kind of stream of consciousness style delivery. No More Parties in LA featuring Kendrick Lamar. Fantastic production from my boy Madlib. Great verses from both Kendrick and Kanye, especially Kanye, whose verse is just so long and he's just rapping and rapping and rapping non-stop. It's a great lyrical change of pace from some of the more questionable lines that you'll hear earlier on in the album. The closing track, Saint Pablo, featuring Sampha, sends the album out on a very introspective and personal note. Sampha's contribution to the track is heavenly. Despite all of these great moments, I still don't really think The Life of Pablo adds up to any kind of grand artistic statement. It just feels like a bunch of great ideas packed together with a bunch of weaker ideas. And also the track list doesn't have any consistent flow at all. Maybe to some people that's what makes the album so special. It's so unpredictable, it's so all over the place. Kanye explores so many different styles. Just in my opinion, he doesn't do all of them justice. The song Part 2 is essentially just a remix of Designer's Panda, and while Kanye does add a bit of his own spin to the track, why is this on this album? Why couldn't this have just been released by Designer? This has no place amongst the core tracks of a Kanye album. It's just a Designer remix. Why couldn't this have just been like a bonus track or something? The track Wolves as well just feels really disjointed, doesn't really go anywhere. 30 Hours is a cool song at first, but it kind of gets super boring when the 30 Hours refrain just gets repeated over and over with Kanye just kind of rambling on top of it. Overall, The Life of Pablo is definitely a unique and a perplexing moment in Kanye's discography, but I just don't see it as one of his best works. Graduation acted as a bit of a departure from the blends of hip-hop and soul from the College Dropout and Late Registration. Instead, Graduation largely incorporates elements of electronic music and pop, as Kanye aimed to create sounds that were more anthemic and accessible. Of course, this gave us one of Kanye's best and most popular singles in Stronger. The Daft Punk sample, the one-liners, the larger-than-life production. It's honestly one of the best hip-hop singles of the whole 2000s. There's a couple of my all-time favourite Kanye songs on this album. For example, the song Can't Tell Me Nothing, which sees him confidently reflect on his growing status and fame, with a dash of self-awareness in there as well. There's also the track Flashing Lights, which I genuinely think is one of Kanye's best produced songs of all time. The song is so glamorous. The strings on this track, amazing. I love the somber feel of the song Everything I Am. It has a beautifully chopped soul sample. It even sounds like it could have fit onto Late Registration, honestly. There's plenty of stuff on this album that I always return to, but I also think there's a handful of tracks that are either weak or just don't fit the vibe of the album at all. For example, the song Drunken Hot Girls, which is my least favourite of the album, probably one of Kanye's weakest overall as well, to be honest. I guess I like the fact that Kanye's getting a bit loose and playful on this song. Also, Mos Def's contribution is kind of cool while it's on. But these two names coming together on the same track should yield much better results than this song. And spoilers, it does on the College Dropout. Honestly, after listening to this song, I'd much rather just go and listen to the Can song that Kanye so heavily borrows from. Also, I'd have to point out that Barry Bonds doesn't really fit the anthemic vibe of this album. However, I still kind of like that song. I think there's a lot of unnecessary hate directed towards Barry Bonds. The beat slaps, Kanye goes off, and yeah, Lil Wayne gets outshined by Kanye, but, you know, that song still kind of goes hard. Overall, I think Graduation is a pretty great album. It's a pretty successful experiment with these pop and electronic sounds, and it just narrowly gets beaten by the next album on the list. '808s and Heartbreak, Kanye's full foray away from hip-hop and fully into the worlds of pop and electronic music. This album was largely the result of a very difficult time in Kanye's life, which saw both the death of his mother as well as the end of his long-term relationship. There's a lot of compelling statements on this album that Kanye makes about the loneliness of fame, namely on the track Welcome to Heartbreak with Kid Cudi, where he's kind of singing about longing to have a normal life. There's a lot of other highlights on here too, such as the career-defining single Heartless. While lyrically it's not the deepest or most revealing song I've ever heard, it is a hit single at the end of the day, and it functions very well in this context while still being very emotionally potent. The song Love Lockdown features very sparse production as well as some very passionate auto-tune vocals from Kanye, especially on the hook. I love the production on the song Paranoid, but it does kind of stick out on the track list as easily the most upbeat song here. I really do love hearing the personal and emotional side of Kanye all over this album, because it can be really easy to think he's just a complete douchebag, he's just all the way gone with his arrogance, but listening to an album like this does really make you realise that Kanye West is just a human at the end of the day, and he feels the same emotions that all of us feel. The only song that I'm not really into on this album is the song See You In My Nightmares with Lil Wayne, and it's mainly because of Lil Wayne that I don't like this song. He's trying to pull off all these really stressed and over-the-top vocal inflections, but it just ends up coming off as horrible. It sounds horrible. I know he's trying to be passionate and expressive, but it doesn't sound good. I've really warmed up to this album over the years. I think it was a pretty big risk to make this kind of stylistic shift away from hip-hop, but I think for the most part it pans out quite well. It's a strong artistic statement that went on to influence a myriad of rappers who would cross over into pop in the 2010s. For example, Drake. It's not a perfect album by any means, but the fact that there's 4 albums I would put ahead of this one, even though I really do love this album, is just kind of a testament to how much quality music Kanye's responsible for. Oh yes, it's YEEZUS. This is easily going to be the most controversial placement on this list. YEEZUS is easily Kanye's most polarising release. Less so in terms of the critical reception, most critics love YEEZUS. It's more in terms of the fan reception, which is very divided. Coming off of the grandiosity of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Kanye did a complete 180, left that at the door, and opted for a more industrial and challenging sound. YEEZUS is essentially Kanye's own take on the industrial hip-hop wave that was already growing in the 2010s thanks to artists like Death Grips, Clipping, and to a lesser extent Shabazz Palaces. Now, this album is not nearly as confounding or challenging as a lot of the albums that those industrial hip-hop acts were making at the time. This is not like Kanye's The Powers That Be. However, for the audience that Kanye had built up to that point, this album was going to challenge and alienate a lot of listeners. Truth be told, this is one of Kanye's weakest lyrical outings, but I think he makes up for it with raw energy, as well as the punk aesthetic that you're going to find all over this album. Straight from the get-go, we have the track On Sight, which opens with blaring distortion, leading into this skittering kind of minimal beat over which Kanye just sounds so nasty. Black Skinhead, one of Kanye's more well-known songs, is just so in your face, but it's also so catchy and memorable. The song I Am a God is, yes, very egotistical, but it's also very just brash and confrontational. Kanye just doesn't care on this song. The production sounds like I'm about to meet my doom. It's so intense. His first verse on the song as well is so killer and cold-blooded. I love the line where he's saying he's the only rapper that's compared to Michael Jackson. Blood on the Leaves is one of Kanye's most ambitious and perplexing songs, with its eerie and chopped up Nina Simone sample, the stabbing trumpets, relentless use of auto-tune as well. The closing track, Bound 2, sees Kanye round off the album with a soulful and a relaxed feel, with Kanye presumably rapping about his relationship with Kim Kardashian, but he's doing it in the most Kanye way possible. It's a very playful and a very funny song, but I do genuinely love it as the closing track on this album. It's such an unexpected but such a pleasant and such a welcome way to wrap things up on this album. There's a couple other moments on YEEZUS where Kanye's using these more melodic moments to break up the harsher elements of the album, such as the final minute and 25 seconds of the track New Slaves featuring Frank Ocean. And honestly, that last minute and 25 seconds of that song is just one of my favourite moments on the whole thing. I still don't really like the song I'm In It all that much, easily my least favourite on the album. There's just too many cringy lines on it for its own good. While it might not be as cutting edge or as challenging as a lot of the best stuff that industrial hip-hop has to offer, I still think YEEZUS functions very well as a stylistic shift in Kanye's discography, and it's easily the most experimental of any Kanye release. The College Dropout, Kanye West's debut studio album. Prior to this album's release, Kanye was already working with Jay-Z, but he was mostly seen as a producer first. He had aspirations to become a rapper in his own right, but no label wanted to sign him because of how his background and his image completely contrasted with what was mainstream in hip-hop at the time. During the early to mid-2000s, most of the mainstream rappers at the time were writing songs about the gangster lifestyle. They all wanted to be perceived as gangsters in the public eye. That is, until Kanye releases The College Dropout, in which he addresses themes such as family, materialism, religion, conformity in society, among many other topics. This album is probably the most relatable, charming, and funny Kanye has ever been in his whole career. Whether he's rapping about embracing his religious beliefs on the track Jesus Walks, or he's talking about flying away from his boring 9-to-5 job on the song Spaceship, Kanye always has a smart observation to make on this album. His message across The College Dropout is to not let society dictate your own actions. Make your own path, create your own waves. And he often criticises the education system on a number of the songs here. He also touches upon things like self-consciousness as well as consumerism on the song All Falls Down, where he raps about buying expensive clothes and jewellery just to have something over other people. There's also such a great line towards the end of his last verse where he says, "We're all self-conscious, I'm just the first to admit it," which I kind of take as a comment on the image of most rappers at the time. The production on this album is obviously brilliant, as is most of Kanye's production work across his career, but the beats here are just so soulful and so upbeat. His soul sample chopping talents were just so on full display all across this album. I just want to give a nod to some of the other tracks on this album that I love. Of course, Through the Wire, a classic. There's School Spirit, there's Get 'Em High, Two Words with Mos Def, as well as the song Last Call, where Kanye kind of narrates the story of how he got signed by Rockefeller Records. But he does it in such a cool and creative way that only someone like Kanye would be able to pull off. This is a hip-hop classic, it's one of the best debut albums in the whole genre, and it's the inception point of one of the greatest artists of the 21st century. There's not really much else to say, to be honest. Much like the College Dropout, Late Registration finds its roots in soul music with various soul samples all across the album. However, Kanye kind of went in a different direction with the production style of this album, as he enlists the help of composer John Bryan to help incorporate live instrumentation all across the album. This led to Late Registration's production being way more layered and orchestral than its predecessor. The string sections, the horns, the piano chords, every sound on this album just sounds so lush, it sounds so amazing. Lyrically, Kanye is just as sharp as he was on the College Dropout, as he addresses wider societal themes such as class division as well as the black experience. But he also addresses rather personal themes like the health of his grandmother and the relationship he had with his mother. The song Gold Digger, of course, a classic Kanye single that sees him tell stories of the destructive power of money, but somehow he manages to do it over a danceable beat and a Ray Charles sample. Only he could do this. Touch the Sky with Lupe Fiasco is kind of a triumphant moment where Kanye's encouraging you, the listener, to have the same perseverance that he did to get to the place where you want to be. There's also a very generous Curtis Mayfield sample in there, but it works very well. It's very well placed. Crack music, another fantastic highlight in this album. Kanye kind of dissects the effects of crack on the black community, but he also kind of subtly contrasts it with the positive influence that black music can have on the black community. Again, early on in his career, Kanye was just always making very thoughtful observations of society and culture, and I think he does that the best on this album. Like I said, there's also some very personal moments on this album, such as the very upbeat and heartfelt song Hey Mama, which is obviously dedicated to Kanye's mother Donda. Even though this song is so radiant and vibrant, it's devastating listening to this song now, knowing that his mother would pass away just 2 or 3 years after this album came out. The skits on this album are very colourful, very topical, and they add a lot of personality to the album, and they kind of break up the core tracks. This album and its predecessor, The College Dropout, are probably Kanye's 2 most similar albums in his discography. Yes, there's a lot of difference between them, but they are both largely rooted in soul music, and they both also see Kanye making very thoughtful observations about society and the world around him, and for that reason, I think they're largely interchangeable on this list. There isn't really that much between them. I guess I decided to put this one at number 2 because it does kind of feel like an update and a progression of that soul-rooted sound that Kanye introduced on The College Dropout. Anyway, it's finally time to move on to number 1. Wow, I bet none of you saw this coming. What a surprising pick for Kanye's number 1 album. No one's ever had this opinion before. Yeah, it's the consensus pick, but it's the consensus pick for a reason. After the stylistic left turn of 808s and Heartbreak, as well as the whole Taylor Swift VMA situation, which you all know about, and also after the death of his mother and the end of his long-term relationship, Kanye comes back to hip-hop with this album, and just fireworks. He combines elements of all the albums that came before this one. The soul sample chopping proficiency of College Dropout and Late Registration, the anthemic and grand compositions of Graduation, the pop balladry of 808s and Heartbreak, as well as a load of newer sounds as well. And he compounds them all into one masterpiece. This is easily Kanye at his most daring, his most ambitious, his most creative. He spends the majority of this album talking about the highs and the lows of fame, as well as transitioning into the A-list celebrity lifestyle that he kind of paved for himself. In terms of the music on this album, I don't even know where to start. The song Power is another one of Kanye's signature songs. The rock-inspired instrumentation, the King Crimson sample, the musings on the danger of power. It's just so good. The song Gorgeous sees Kanye delivering some of his best and most passionate bars of his whole career, rapping about social and racial injustice as well as his own status in the music industry. The song Runaway, although I do think it's just a little bit overrated, is often touted as Kanye's best song. It is a very unique take on relationships and intimacy, and it is obviously one of his most ambitious undertakings. The song Devil in a New Dress contains a wonderfully chopped Smokey Robinson sample, as well as that amazing guitar solo towards the back end of the track from Mike Dean. The Rick Ross feature on the track is also very well placed. He just sounds so good over instrumentals like these. The song So Appalled is an absolute beast of a posse cut, with Kanye, Jay-Z, Pusha T and Sci-Hi the Prince all dropping fire verses one after another. All four of them kind of just reflect on the absurdity and the ridiculousness of the celebrity lifestyle. The risk-taking and the maximalist approach that Kanye employs on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy really do make it stick out in his discography. He really throws everything he's got at this album, and it results in an album that is just so packed with unforgettable and amazing moments. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, in my opinion, is Kanye West's magnum opus. It's in contention for one of the best hip-hop albums of all time. And that pretty much concludes my Kanye West worst to best list. Wow, we're finally at the end. That script took me like 7 or 8 hours to finish, because I could not think of the order I wanted to put these albums in. I knew the first 3. I knew that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was going to be number 1. But I had no idea about the rest. It's so difficult to rank Kanye's albums. Can we also just take a moment to appreciate how much artistic evolution Kanye has gone through over the course of his career? I mean, the same artist that made Jesus Walks also made I Am a God. The same artist that made Gold Digger also made Runaway. The same artist that made Heartless also made Famous. It's crazy how many different avenues Kanye has gone down in his career. How many different headspaces he's been in to create all these different expressions. Anyway, thank you so much if you've made it this far. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more music related content like this. And yeah, thank you very much. I will see you very soon.